Hello.
Hello. I'm supposed to have more energy when I say hello to you guys.
Hey, everybody. I did. She did hand motions and everything else. She was jazz hands up in here. Hey, everybody. Welcome
You
to
want energy. You got energy.
I'm just trying
Now I'm done. I'm not doing a story now.
and scene.
Okay, I'm sorry. Finish your spiel.
Welcome,
Sorry.
everybody, to another amazing week of Case Files with Kat
And Ashley.
Awesome. Our producer told her to have more energy, and here is what the product is.
Howdy. Get it together, Kat. We're doing a podcast.
We're casting our pod. Meanwhile, Jason's back there laughing. I wish you guys could hear him. He's trying to be very quiet, but I can hear him holding it in. Like, he's going to fart. Okay. Hey, so what's up?
Not much. What is happening over there? I see you're drinking.
I got a Desert Mirage Hazy IPA from Shiner. And it's delicious. And it's another one of those. I know, it's another one of those cactus waters. I'm pretty sure this is what I had last week. I don't know, or one of those weeks. It's really nice. I had Brewhaus Brew or this one. I don't know. I was not adventurous this week, but this is still really good. It's just good. The old standby. Yeah, I know. She wouldn't let us make her a cocktail.
Yeah, I don't know.
You might need it after your story tonight.
You guys might need it after my story tonight.
Well, I got my beer.
I'm good. But yeah, I don't know. It's been a week. It's been a week, like every week. You know.
I know.
Same.
Yeah.
I did have a question of the week this week. So
yes. Yeah. We're so bad about that now. It's just
well,
okay. Give it to me.
I just happened to see this when I was scrolling Facebook, and I was like, "That is so appropriate for the story I'm doing tonight."
Give it.
So it was. I'm paraphrasing because I'm not looking at it. But if God created,
do you want me to open it?
Go.
Okay. It says, Satan opens up heck, a lighter version of hell. What kinds of torture are in it?
So, what would your answer be?
I'm listening to see if this producer wants to answer. No, we're good. Okay. So his answer earlier was constantly wet underwear, which I didn't understand. I was like, did you pee yourself? But apparently it's like when you're going down Thunder Mountain in the ride and you get out and your butt's wet and it kind of just
extravagant answer.
I mean, like you have to go through the whole process. So that was his first answer. I have a couple of things. The scraping, hearing the sound, everybody scrapes their forks on their plate. God. That's just forks and knives on, cutlery on plates is the worst. So that's one thing that would be just, blah. And then a bunch of bumpers, having to look at bumper stickers, like all crooked. So visually, things that were not centered, it's hard for me to look at, like, so visual annoyances like that. And then only having like Natty Light to drink, like not being able to drink anything else. No offense to Natty Light, but offense. I mean, yeah, it's a Keystone, or some, like, I'm being forced to drink like Schlitz for eternity, yes, something
40s.
40s.
I love 40s.
Yeah, like, does Schlitz come in 40s? Anyway, 40s
Probably.
I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, it's cheap enough. So not being able to drink my beloved IPAs, like, that would be heck. That would be heck.
Okay. I had some.
Okay, go.
You could still listen to music, but it was only that Kid Bop, like, cover versions of them,
Kids with a Z?
Yeah,
Kids Bop.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. It's wonderful.
Surrounded by cute puppies, but you couldn't pet any of them. That would be my nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed being stuck in a house of mirrors.
That's
like
awful.
Perpetually just stuck.
That's horrible. Oh yeah, I had another one. Oh yeah, go.
Like trying to sleep, but like there was always light on in the room. Like you couldn't turn the light off in the room when you were trying to sleep.
Yeah,
like that would drive me crazy because I have to have it pitch black.
One of mine was always having that anxiety, like being in a perpetual anxiety dream where you're trying to wake up and you can't.
Yeah, like
and
the
just
sleep paralysis.
yeah,
type
that
thing.
sleep paralysis. Yeah, like that's why I can't nap, because that's what happens to me.
Yeah.
I can't. I tried to nap. I was in the quietest place this weekend and immediately went into one of those dreams. Like I just can't do it. I don't think I fall asleep heavy enough.
Yeah. Also for me, only being able to drink. Don't tell her because she's already so offended.
So hers would be drinking IPAs,
Oh my God,
and mine would be
yes.
not being able to drink IPAs. That's
It would
funny.
just be like awful.
We're like the odd couple.
Yes. Yes. So that would be mine. We had some really, really, really great answers, so I'm excited to read those here in a little bit.
Yeah, man.
Before I get too far into anything, I owe Sarah an apology.
Sarah.
A few weeks ago, after she came on our show and insulted us, she said she left us a voicemail apologizing. Then I came on air and said she didn't, and she actually had, and then I forgot to play it, so it's just a big loop of nonsense between us. So I apologize. She did, in fact, leave us a voicemail. So at the end
I'm offended for her.
I know, at the end of the episode, I will be playing her voicemail in the Sarah segment.
Oh, she has a Sarah segment?
She dubbed her segment the Sarah segment.
You got to say it right, though. Sarah.
Yes, Sarah segment will be at the end with her voicemail. So I apologize, Sarah.
Sarah. You got to say it right.
She said she was never going to listen to us again. So, yeah.
What? Hold on.
But now she has her own segment. So anyways. Also, I do have to do a few trigger warnings because this is probably one of the hardest stories I've had to research. And for me, that's a lot. I left out a lot because I just couldn't stomach reading any more about it. But this is something that I feel is very, very important for people to know because it was so kind of covered up for a long time. And so there's talk about extreme violence, torture, death, rape. Like if there's a trigger warning, it's in this story. So if you think that you might be...
Is this worse than my Japanese torture story? Is it about the same? It's pretty bad.
About the girl?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same, but also kind of worse.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
But it's something that's part of history that happened that I just think is just so crazy. And it's not just this particular story where these things happen. This happens a lot, and we just don't talk about it. And I think it should be something that is talked about because people need to know what happens during certain experiments and stuff. So, again... There's a lot of trigger warnings. Okay. So please be advised if you think you're going to be offended or you have children around, please do not let your children listen.
Hold on. Olivia, are you listening?
So I'm working on doing a couple of different stories on military bases or military experiments, things like that, crimes that happen during wartime. Because it's very interesting to me that so many of these things happened by governments where the people were supposed to trust them.
Yeah.
And things happened. So, again, please do not let your children listen. I'm going to be discussing Unit 731. Have you heard of 731?
Nope.
Okay. So Unit 731, it was a World War II Japanese experiment program. It was founded in 1935. And it was a covert biological and chemical warfare and research development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army. So these experiments would take place over a span of 13 years, and much of the evidence was deliberately burned in an attempt to hide what they did. And all survivors, well, there were no survivors, but all the people who were alive at the time that they thought they were going to be discovered were murdered. So there's not really, as far as survivors go, which I'll talk about more later, it's the people that were doing the experiments. Most of them survived, of course. So as of today, the true extent of what all happened at Unit 731, and what they did to unsuspecting Chinese civilians is only known mostly to historians and scholars. And I'll discuss why again a little bit later, why you probably haven't heard about it. And if you have, you haven't heard like the full extent. And I did leave a bunch out of this because it's just so much. There's so much, and it's so...
Like, is it so much because like there's so many people that were...
There's so many people. There were so many experiments. There were so many... All of the different units of the Japanese army were doing different things to different people. And it's just so hard for me to stomach. So I knew if it was hard for me, it's going to be hard for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
And so I will be talking about some of the worst things they did that I could put in here. And like what the consequences were, what the aftermath was, and why people haven't heard about it.
Okay.
So in the beginning,
so we won't fault anybody if you decide to skip this episode.
Yeah. But I definitely think it's important to learn. I think it's
Yeah.
important to understand certain relations between certain countries and why they are the way they are, and the United States involvement in it, and what war crimes really happen. Because it's just insane. These experiments to me are insane, and there's experiments that happen here in the United States. And if you don't think experiments are happening here, you are mistaken. They've definitely happened. Okay, so Unit 731's official name was the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army, and was formed before World War II. And let me say, I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of words, but I do not care because these people were awful. So we're just going to go past it. So I'm sorry, don't at me. I don't care if their names are pronounced wrong. Most of the time, I do care because they're victims, but these people were not victims.
Oh, okay, okay. So Glenn, laugh away.
Yes,
laugh away up
Glenn
there.
will probably find this pronunciation's hilarious. Anyways, so the unit's charge was clear from the beginning: testing, producing, and storing biological weapons. Such activities had been outlawed by at least 2 international treaties at this time, though the Japanese did not get into the 1925 Geneva Protocol. And none of this really mattered to them anyways, because at the start of Unit 731, it was done by a man named General Shiru Ishii, and he was merciless. Like he basically, and I'll talk more about this, but he basically viewed it, well, if there's a treaty banning it, they must be effective. So we need to learn how to do it to other people who are banned from doing it, kind of situation. So a little bit about Ishii. He was born in Japan in 1892, and he became a doctor. And he became a doctor in 1920. He graduated from the Kyoto Imperial University. He had reputation for being very thoughtless towards his colleagues. He was very thoughtless towards his colleagues, but as far as the professors, he was kind of like a suck up. Like he was really, really, really nice and attentive to his professors and stuff, but not to any of the students or anyone. He ended up marrying the daughter of the university's president and joined the Army Medical Corps. And then when in 1925, the Geneva Protocol banned the use of bacteriological and chemical weapons in war, he began to urge the creation of a Japanese bacteriological weapons program, which I haven't even heard of that before. Like, I've heard of biological weapons and I've heard of chemical weapons, but I hadn't heard of bacteriological weapons. I can't say it. Okay, but you know what I mean. Bacteriological. I don't know how else to say it, guys.
That's good. That's great.
Anywho, Ishii reasoned that such weapons must be very effective, otherwise other countries would not have prohibited them. So when he learned this, he started traveling through Europe and the US, and he traveled for several years with an interest in this bacteriological weapons that were used in World War I. So upon his return, he was appointed professor of immunology at the Tokyo Army Medical School and given the rank of major. While he was there, Ishii quickly made a name for himself, inventing an effective water purification filter that he allegedly demonstrated before the emperor. But this wasn't enough for him. Like, just because this this got him a lot of attention, but he wanted more fame, and it just wasn't enough for him. And so he continued advocating that the Japanese army develop biological weapons. So he was like, we need to create these. We have to create these. It's a must. So in 1932, the Japanese government put him in charge of a testing and production facility in the Chinese province of Manchuria, which the Japanese had invaded the previous year. So his facility for Unit 731 was in this city of Harbin, and it was a starting place, but they wanted secrecy. He knew that this needed to be kept very under wraps. So Ishii relocated this group to a prison camp that was 60 miles away. So they start out in the city of Harbin. They move 60 miles away to a prison camp. But once they moved to the prison camp, the camp was blown up by escapees. And so he had to come up with another plan. And so this time, the installation called Ping Fan was constructed about 14 miles from Harbin. So this is where they would officially be located. This was the last place they moved to. And it was completed in 1940. And Unit 731 housed 3,000 personnel. At a ceremony honoring the event, Ishii made the facility's purpose very, very crystal clear. A doctor's God-given mission, Ishii said, was to block and treat disease, but the work upon Japan's enemies, let me back up. A doctor's God-given mission, Ishii said, was to block and treat disease, but the work upon which we are now about to embark is the complete opposite of these principles, in the name of defeating Japan's enemies. So Ishii and his staff spent the next 5 years mixing all sorts of pathogens that, some of the world's most horrific diseases. So they would mix and try to make these things worse. So like anthrax, the plague, gas, gangrene, smallpox, botulism, and others. So they were just trying to make these as potent as possible. And so that was before they even got any prisoners or any humans involved. Like, this was literally just scientists and doctors in a room using all of this stuff to make them as potent as possible. The experiments had not even started at this point. So they started using Chinese prisoners as guinea pigs. Allied prisoners of war were also targeted. Thousands of experiments began. Vivisections without anesthesia, and I'll talk more about what each of these are. Injections of venereal diseases to examine the spread rate. Amputations to study blood loss. Removal of other body parts and organs. Starvation. Pressure chambers and frostbite are just a few of the things that they were experimenting with. So I'm going to cover 6 of the most disturbing experiments, but one that I did not cover was they used to put people in pressure chambers to see how long it would take and how much pressure it would take for their eyes to like literally pop out of their head. Like, that was something that they would time. And I'm talking about children, adults, not just like prisoners. Like, they would put children in here, they would put adults in here, they would put prisoners in here. And that's all they were doing to see how much pressure it would take for people's like skulls and stuff to pop. So, like I said, I'm going to talk about 6 of the most of the disturbing experiments.
So, I mean, those are sadists.
This was all in the name of science.
Sadism. Okay, got it. Okay.
All in the name of science and protecting Japan from its enemies.
Okay.
So the first test was frostbite testing. Yoshimura Hisato was a physiologist assigned to Unit 731, and he took a special interest in hypothermia. As a part of the study in limb injuries, Hisato routinely submerged prisoners' limbs in a tub of water filled with ice and then held until the arm or leg had frozen solid and a coat of ice had formed over the skin. So then evidence shows that the limbs would make a sound like people, like the organs would make a sound like if you hit it, like with a cane or something, it would sound like a plank of wood, like it was frozen solid. And so Hizada would then try different methods for rapid rewarming of the frozen appendage. So he would sometimes douse the limbs with hot water. Sometimes he would hold it open and open on fire.
Like ice?
Oh, I don't know. Sometimes he would just leave the subject untreated overnight to see how long it would take their own blood to thaw out the frost. And I saw some pictures of people that had these, and like he did not discriminate. Women, men, children. He would do these frostbite tests on all kinds of people, arms, legs.
Oh my God.
And if people lost their limbs, they lost their limbs.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so he would.
And they were like awake during all of this?
Oh, they're awake, and at no point during any of these experiments do any of them get any kind of anesthesia. Like they are fully awake and aware of what's happening to them in all of these experiments.
Oh my God. Okay.
I don't know if it's vivisection or vivisection, but either way. This part is horrifying to me. Because I hate medical procedures. I hate needles. I hate any of that kind of stuff. Okay, so vivisections of conscious prisoners. This part of the unit was called Morata, and so that word means logs in Japan, and that's what they would refer to these humans as logs. They took the research a little further than usual bounds of medical ethics, obviously, by observing injuries in the course of disease on living patients. At first, these patients were volunteers from the ranks of the army. Like their own army would volunteer to do these experiments because they thought they were doing good. But as the experiments reached limits of what could be non-invasively observed, the supply of army volunteers started to dry up. And so they started using Chinese prisoners of war and civilian prisoners. And when I say civilian prisoners, they would go out into these cities. They would kidnap people from their homes. They would bring them to this unit.
So they weren't like prisoners already. Like
they would go through their prisoners, but when they would run out of prisoners, they would literally go into all of these different cities, kidnap people, just take them from their homes, take them from their lives, bring them to do these experiments. There was over 400,000 people affected by these.
Oh my God.
I mean, the numbers are really unknown, but I know at least 400,000. Okay. So as the concept of consent was clearly out the window, none of these people volunteered for this. None of these people agreed to it. They did not give a shit. So did the restraint of the researchers. There was no law. There was no regulations. They were literally told they could do whatever they needed to do to get the results. Like they had nobody regulating them. Like literally the more fucked up they were, the better. Like that's literally that was the philosophy. The worse you are to these people, the more you put them through, the better. So it was around this time that Unit 731 began referring to confined research subjects as logs, which is Murata in Japanese. So the vivisection, for example, is the practice of mutilating human bodies without anesthesia to study the operation of living systems. Thousands of men and women, mostly Chinese communist prisoners, as well as children, elderly farmers, they were infected with diseases such as the plague. I don't know how to say this word. Cholera.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I'm sorry.
That's okay. My favorite book is Love in the Time of Cholera. That's okay.
Anyways, the plague. They would then had their organs removed for examination before they died in order to study the effects of the disease without the decomposition that occurs after death. So while alive, after injecting them with these diseases, they would cut them open to examine what the organs were doing and how they were like responding. Subjects had limbs amputated and reattached to the other side of the body. Others had their limbs crushed or frozen.
What?
They had the circulation cut off to...
So they would take like an arm and put it on the other side to see if it would still work?
Yes, they just do shit to do shit.
Oh, God.
They would cut off body parts to measure the rate of blood loss. They would cut circulation off to observe the progress of gangrene.
That's like, so what they're here are all the possible things that could happen to our soldiers. What happens?
Yes.
That's basically.
Finally, when a body was all used up and they could not do anything else to it, they would typically shoot or kill them by lethal injection, though most of them were just buried alive. So none, absolutely none of the Chinese, Mongolian, Korean, or Russian prisoners assigned to Unit 731 survived their confinement. Not a single one.
And you said like over 400,000 plus the
400,000 were the women.
Oh,
there is thousands and thousands, and I'll talk about the women in a second. But 400,000 women were just part of one thing that they were doing. So that's what I was saying. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it was over 400,000. And that was we're only on number 2. We're now on number 3. Weapons test. So the effectiveness of various weapons was of obvious interest to the Japanese army. To determine this effectiveness, Unit 731 would herd prisoners together on a firing range, and they would blast them from varying ranges with multiple different weapons. They would use the Nambu 8mm pistol, bolt-action rifles, machine guns, grenades. They would study wound patterns and penetration depths. They were compared on the bodies of the dead and dying inmates. Bayonets, swords, and knives were also studied in this way, though the prisoners were usually bound for these tests. Flamethrowers were also tested on both covered and exposed skin. In addition, they had gas chambers that were set up at the unit facilities and test subjects exposed to nerve gas and blister agents. Heavy objects were dropped onto bound prisoners to study crush injuries. Subjects were locked up and deprived of food and water to learn how long humans could survive without them. Victims were allowed to drink only seawater or were given injections of mismatched human and animal blood to study transfusions and the clotting process. Meanwhile, prolonged X-ray exposure sterilized and killed thousands of research participants. If you notice, in all of these different experiments, thousands of people died. So each one of these had thousands of study subjects.
But earlier you said not one of them ever lived. We just don't know.
None of them.
So all
and they deliberately
the total
burned,
tally
yeah.
is like a guesstimate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in addition to the prolonged X-ray exposure, they would inflict horrible burns when the emitting plates were miscalibrated or held too close to the subject's nipples, genitals, or faces. This one was rough for me. Study the effects of high G forces on pilots and falling paratroopers. Unit 731 personnel would load human beings into large centrifuges, whatever they're called, and would spin them around at higher and higher speeds. And they lost consciousness and or died, which happened around 10 to 15 Gs, though young children showed a lower tolerance of acceleration forces. So they would include very young children in a lot of these experiments. And I will talk about, but they would take pregnant women and cut them open and see how things would affect the baby. Experiment 4. Syphilis experiments.
Oh.
So venereal disease, it was a huge thing. It was, according to them, the bane of the organized military since ancient Egypt. The Japanese took a lot of interest in the symptoms and treatment of syphilis.
That's weird. Did they all have it?
I'm assuming because of the amount of rapes they would do. This was why they were concerned. To learn what they needed to know, the doctors that were assigned to Unit 731 infected prisoners with the disease and withheld treatment to observe the uninterrupted course of the illness. A contemporary treatment, a primitive chemotherapy agent, was sometimes administered over a period of months to observe the side effects. To ensure the effective transmission of the disease, male prisoners who had syphilis were ordered to rape female and male fellow prisoners, who would then be monitored to observe the onset of the disease. If the first exposure failed to establish infection,
Oh my God.
more rapes would be arranged until it did. And
she was right about this story. She told me earlier today, she said, this might be the worst story I've ever done. And I was like, worse than the toy box killer, because that's pretty bad.
And I'm leaving a lot out. I'm leaving a lot of details out because I just couldn't do it. Raped and forced pregnancies. So beyond just the syphilis experiments, rape was a very common feature of Unit 731's experiments. Female prisoners of childbearing age were sometimes forcibly impregnated so that weapon and trauma experiments could be done on them. So they would get them pregnant, they would wait for them to form the baby, and then they would use them and use weapons and other trauma on them to see how it affected their babies.
What?
And then they would kill them and the baby if the baby didn't already die.
Fuck.
After being infected with various diseases, exposed to chemical weapons, or suffering crush injuries, bullet wounds, and shrapnel injuries, the pregnant subjects were opened up to see the effects of the fetuses. The idea seems to have been to translate the team's findings into civilian medicine, but if Unit 731's researchers ever publish these results, they have never been found. So there's no
sadists.
Nothing.
It was not for science. This is. Ugh.
This one's pretty rough too. I mean, they're all rough, but germ warfare. And you guys probably haven't even heard of any of this, and
nope,
it just
never.
blows my mind when I heard about this. Like all of this. The totality of Unit 731's research was in support of their larger mission, which by 1939 was to develop horrific weapons of mass destruction for use against the Chinese population and presumably American and Soviet forces. To this end, Unit 731 cycled through tens of thousands of prisoners at several facilities, which had been occupied by Imperial forces for years. Inmates of these facilities were infected with several of the most lethal pathogens known to science, such as Yersinia pestis, which causes bubonic and other kinds of plague. Typhus, is that how do you say it? Typhus. Which the Japanese hoped would spread from person to person after being deployed and populate disputed areas. So basically, they were intentionally creating diseases, viruses, and releasing them and hoping that it would depopulate countries. To breed the most lethal strains possible.
What year was this again?
1939.
Wow. Okay.
To breed, which is honestly not that long ago, to breed the most lethal strains possible, doctors monitored patients for rapid onset of symptoms and quick progression. Prisoners who pulled through were shot, but those who got sickest fastest were bled to death on a mortuary table, and their blood was used to transfer to other prisoners. The sickest of those prisoners would themselves be bled to transfer the most potent strain to yet another generation. So they just kept infecting people to make it worse and worse. One member of Unit 731, this part fucked me up. One unit One member unit, 731, later recalled that the very sick and unresisting prisoners would be laid out on the slab so a line could be inserted into their artery. When most of the blood had been siphoned off and the heart was too weak to pump anymore, an officer in leather boots would climb onto the table and jump on the victim's chest with enough force to crush the ribcage, whereupon another dollop of blood would pour out into the container.
Kevin's gonna lose battery power tonight.
When the plague Bacillus had been bred to what was felt to be a sufficiently lethal caliber, the last generation of prisoners to be infected were exposed to huge numbers of fleas. So they would infect the fleas with this stuff to suck the blood of humans and then spread it to other humans. So prisoners would be infected were exposed to a huge number of fleas. So the fleas would take their blood, and then the fleas were then packed in dust and sealed into clay bomb casings. And on October 4th, 1940, Japan bombers deployed these casings, each of them loaded with 30,000 fleas that had each sucked blood from a dying prisoner over the Chinese village of, and I apologize because I should know how to say this because these people suffered bad. Quzhou. Witnesses to the raid recall a fine reddish dust settling on surfaces all over town, followed by a rash of painful flea bites that affected everybody in the town.
Did they all die?
From contemporary accounts, it is known that more than 2,000 civilians died of plague following this attack, and that another 1,000 or so died in a nearby city after the plague was carried there by sick railway workers. Other attacks using anthrax killed approximately 6,000 more people in the same area. Their plan all along, though, was to launch these flea-filled bombs on San Diego in a mission called Operations Cherry Blossoms at Night, but the war ended before this could happen. So their plan all along was to bring these to the United States.
Holy shit.
That was always their plan, is to see if it worked and then bring it here.
What would happen if it got, to their country, though? I don't know.
I guess they didn't think... Well, they were doing all this. They knew how to stop it, according to them, because that was the point of their research, was to know how to protect themselves from these things and to attack their enemies. So those are just... When I say the Japanese army during this time, each unit was doing something crazy, that was one unit. I'm about to talk about another.
Oh, shit.
It all ties back. So as another note, during the same time period, there were many other war crimes being committed by Japan. When I say many, I mean there's I don't even know how many to count. They were doing so many fucked up things. And it wasn't the Japanese civilians. Please don't think I'm attacking the civilians. I'm strictly talking about
this unit. Yeah.
These people. Okay, I'm not saying the Japanese are bad. I'm saying these people are fucking awful. So the one of the other biggest war crimes that happened during this time was the rape of Nanking, which was also known as the Nanking Massacre. Starting around December 13th, 1937, and continuing for more than 6 weeks, Nanking suffered a few other cities. It suffered in ways a few other cities ever have. The Japanese, looking at the 90,000 captives of this city as an opportunity to train their own soldiers in brutality, transported them out of the city for executions. The more brutal, the better. They marched. The whole goal was to get the soldiers used to killing humans. So they marched the Japanese soldiers into designated killing fields. There, the Japanese officers and enlisted men shot, stabbed, and beheaded the Chinese in an attempt to condition them out of having any kind of human pity for a fallen enemy, including men, women, children. When the supply of prisoners ran out, the Japanese turned on the city's 600,000 civilians, whom the retreating Chinese nationalists had prevented from fleeing. In this fucked up orgy of rape and murder that followed, they would see babies run through with bayonets, pregnant women sliced open with swords, and over 300,000 people were confirmed to be murdered. To give you an idea of exactly how fucked up these things were, a Nazi was there. There were 22 Westerners there. One of them was a Nazi. His name was John, and he was seeing what was happening, and he's like, "This is," and if a Nazi thinks it's messed up, so he went back to
yeah, for real.
He went back to Hitler, and he tried to tell him what was happening. He tried to get him to get involved, but he didn't. So he himself went back with these 22 Westerners, and they created a safety zone near the port under the control of the Nazi that started it to help people escape the city. So when I say that it was messed up, a Nazi helped these people escape because he thought it was so bad.
What?
So anyone
because they were doing their own experiments, dude.
He was genuinely trying to get them out of this because he thought it was so messed up. So if you think about those experiments and how messed up he thought this was, that's the only reason any of the civilians survived. And there are witnesses, there are people who survived this city because of that spoke when things started to come out. So there are confirmed people who say the reason they're alive is because he created the safety zone.
Wow.
So the rape of Nanking was such a horrific event that Japan still has not fully acknowledged or apologized for it. The official Japanese estimates place the number of dead closer to 50,000 people, if not more. That's all they'll confirm, but others say there was definitely more than that. Other war crimes included cannibalism. So from late July to early August 1942, a full division of Japanese soldiers tried to force a difficult crossing in New Guinea's rugged Central Highlands, and they were opposed by a few companies of Australians who managed to not only halt these advances, but to drive them back. So when the Australians went to search the abandoned Japanese camps to find if any of their people that had been taken were there and alive, they were horrified. The Japanese had cannibalized the wounded and dead soldiers. They were found with meat stripped off their legs, half-cooked meat in Japanese dishes. But here's the really, really, really messed up thing. According to the Australian soldiers, there was plenty of normal food. They were not starving. This was not because they were hungry and dying. They just wanted to eat them. So they would, there were rituals where they would cut off the skin and fry it and pass it around in, big groups of people and, celebrations and stuff. They would just do it to do it. They were not starving. They had plenty of normal food. Sex slavery. So though no punishments were ever handed down for the crimes committed during the sack of Nanking, so when they were in that city, in addition to all the torture they were doing, they would literally just, if you could not give them property or whatever they wanted, they were told that they could rape whoever. They were told to be as brutal as they wanted to be in this. They were trying to condition them to not have any emotions towards these people. Anyways, so even though no punishments were ever handed down, the Japanese high command did take note of the international outrage and the disastrous turn of public opinion that their actions caused. Thus, in order to prevent another mass rape, senior commanders ordered the establishment of special military brothels to cater to the men and help keep their distance from the local women. How gracious.
Oh my God.
Female inmates of the facilities were usually drawn from occupied territories elsewhere and transported to remote locations to serve the troops. Some were lured there with lies about easy work as domestic servants, while others were just simply kidnapped. Once they got to their destinations, The women were held as prisoners and could only leave with official permission. Soldiers got 1 day off a month to visit what they called them as comfort women, who were punished if they did not enthusiastically please their customers. Comfort stations were attached to each unit, and they moved in the front, like they were part of the units. And the captive women averaged around ages 16 to 21, though sometimes much younger. And it was estimated that over 400,000 women were part of these comfort units, as they call them.
Like the massage parlors.
So you may be thinking to yourself, well, that's all fucked up. What happened to them? Surely they were punished. Surely something happened to them. Didn't we bomb them? Didn't something happen? No. In August of 1945, in August of 1945, after Hiroshima had been bombed, the Soviet army had invaded Manchuria and utterly annihilated the Japanese army. And the emperor read his infamous surrender declaration over the radio. And as he was doing such, Unit 731 was officially disbanded. The top doctors and soldiers at Unit 731 kept careful records of their experiments and used them to leverage their way to freedom after the war. So when the Allies swept into China, they agreed to grant Ishii, and by the way, the Allies were the United States. They agreed to grant Ishii and many of his associates immunity.
What?
For prosecution for war crimes.
What?
The reasoning, here we go. The reasoning is the United States wanted Unit 731's research for its own use and they wanted to keep the information out of the hands of others, including the Russians. So for years, the true nature of what happened at Unit 731 was shielded from public knowledge. It was classified information. Only reason any of this information really started coming out was because some truth came out in a war crimes trial that was held in the Russian city. And God, I can't speak. The story has messed me up. Some of the truth came out in a war crimes trial that was held in Russia in December 1949. 12 members of Unit 731 and associate units were tried. They were found guilty. Those 12 were imprisoned, but despite the trial, though, much of what went on in Unit 731 was immediately classified by the United States government and remained in heavy, heavy secrecy. Those 12 were pretty much the only that ever got any kind of punishment, and that was because it was Russia and the other countries did not. More details about Unit 731 are still to this day being unearthed. A confession from a unit commander they wrote to U.S. interrogators at a base in Maryland shortly after the war. That was not released until August of 2021, and not by the United States, but by a Chinese agency. Oh. So Chinese and Russian news outlets released this information, and it highlighted America's part in using the information gathered by Unit 731, hiding it and protecting its sources from further prosecution. So it was not the United States that released the information. Someone else released it. Well, someone else released the fact that the United States had this information. And we're hiding it and protecting it. The United States is not the outsider to this. Previously, I think the tendency was for the people in the United States to think this is a problem between Japan and its neighbors. But not only were we, of course, the major combatant in the war, we shaped the post-war settlement, including decisions like the one concerning Unit 731.
Yes.
This was being quoted by a man named Snyder, who was involved in all of this. So we made the big decisions about what was a war crime and what wasn't. We're the creator of the post-war order, and as therefore we have responsibility and involvement in dealing with the issues that were left, unfortunately, unresolved.
Amen. Yes.
So in today's time, research on Unit 731 continues to be conducted all over the world. As of 2018, the Japanese did provide a list of more than 3,600 members of Unit 731 to a Japanese scholar who then released the list. The list of these members included 52 surgeons, 49 engineers, 38 nurses, and 1,117 combat medics. Did any of those people face any kind of punishment? Absolutely not. Yet, even more information with politicians and the government of various countries opening their records. A lot of it is still unknown. A lot of it is in dispute. Of those 3,000 people, they all pretty much became high-class members of society. They all continued to be doctors or professors or medics as if nothing happened. People just pretended like Unit 731 never happened.
Holy shit.
So after it was disbanded, it was like nothing. These people did not get punished. They were living their best lives. They were just walking around normal society.
Having just been the worst kind of sadists. Like, they were torturing people for years.
And the only reason the information came out again is because someone else finally leaked it.
Jesus.
So Ishii did die of throat cancer in Tokyo in 1959 at the age of 67.
Too old.
That's my story of Unit 731 and the war crimes in Japan. But I wanted to come because when I read that the United States knew and hid that information and those people just got to walk free after they did all of that to those people, I was fucking horrified. I cannot believe it. And it just blows my mind. And this is not really an isolated case. You can read all kinds of mind control experiments that have been done here.
Right.
I mean, obviously people know about the German experiments and stuff that were done. I mean, it's just horrifying. And even today, there are so many cases on military bases that go unresolved. They get buried. All of the missing people cases, the dead people that show up, like all kinds of just crime that happens. And it just is scary because these people are supposed to be the people you rely on and trust for your safety.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is my story on Unit 731.
Oh, that fucking sucked.
Yeah, I tried to speed through it.
No, you didn't. I mean,
and like so if you guys want to know more about this and you want to research more about it,
well, I don't know why you would, but
I've included like 8 different places where you can go and read about more of the war crimes. There's a podcast called Unfortunate History. They do a real good job of covering like different historical events and like the reality of what they really were and not necessarily what you're taught in school. He does a really good job. But there's a whole list. You can see them in our show notes. You'll be able to go and find them, and you can just search Unit 731. There's no shortage of information now, like links and stuff that talk about it. But yeah, that was just Unit 731. The cannibalism, the sex slavery, all of these things, they were all just parts of things that were happening that we just were never taught about. So.
Oh my God. Well, I'm not glad I know about it now. I don't know that I can.
I'm not saying that I'm glad I know about it,
like,
but it's like how much other stuff happened that we don't know.
Oh yeah, I'm sure there's a shit ton. Oh my God. Okay, so your question of the week.
Yes,
we're gonna have to cleanse our palates. I'm so glad that you did a question of the week because that was shitty. Okay, so I'm gonna start with our page, not Instagram, just Facebook. So Sarah says the only decor. So her version of heck is the only decor you can have is live, laugh, love signs.
Gross. Disgusting.
Just laugh. RC says Halloween is always one day away. That is your version of hell.
I know.
That is your version.
It almost made me cry when I read it.
Oh my God. Trevor, that's because you were researching this story. Trevor says you never get to know the ending of any movie you watch again. Oh my gosh, that would be horrible for me. Robert says the only music ever played are Christmas songs. We can all agree with that. Jesse says it's perpetually 90 degrees Fahrenheit.
I'm just listing my hell. I don't hear anyone else's hell.
Maybe you just have the same heck as everybody else.
Well, this sounds like hell to me.
I know. It's perpetually 90 degrees every day, both day and night, with no respite and no AC. I think mine might be too extreme for heck and not horrid enough for hell. Okay, I have another one. The book, movie, item you want is always out of stock, but never sold out. So you have the expectation that the item will be in stock, but never is. Chuck says, everyone around you eats with their mouth open and smacks a lot. Not that it bothers me, ... Blake says, you always have that I kind of need to pee feeling. It's horrible. It's horrible. Okay, hold on. Let me... I just went cross-eyed there for a second. Okay. On my page, Heather says, like the medium place on The Good Place. A fridge full of warm beer and 1 million copies of Cannonball Run 2 on VHS. Jamie says, go to sleep and hit your REM cycle only to have the smoke alarm start chirping because they're out of battery. Adam says, White Claw. Shut up, Adam. All right. Ronnie says, no matter how many times you hit the snooze button, the alarm won't turn off.
Oh my God, that would be awful.
Adam responded again saying, your roommate is a customer support agent. Ariel says, people don't stop spraying strong perfumes in small rooms. Janet says, you go to grab the milk gallon for a dish you've already prepared to find it empty. Karen says, someone always standing in front of the drawer you need while cooking. Lori says, you charge your phone all night, but it's always on red at 10% in perpetuity. No! And Linda says, there's a crying baby on your 14-hour flight. True story. It never stopped.
Oh my God. The one on Instagram was from PowerMom67, and it says, your shirt will have an annoying tag in it that you cannot remove.
Oh no.
You guys have such great answers. I love it.
I know. They're so much wittier than I am. That's okay.
I hope you guys are never in control of a torture facility, because some of the fucking awful.
I know. I hope you guys are never in the bad. I know you guys are never in the bad place.
Yes.
So we were looking up things from the Good Place, some examples of their experiments, and it was like stuffing people with hot dogs, butthole spiders. I mean, we were just like, what?
They're really funny when you're watching them in the show. It's really hard to make context.
It's really
if you've never
hard,
seen the
like
show. It's really
a perpetual subscription to the New Yorker. I don't know why. Like, I don't even understand that one. It's like some of them are just weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you are unfamiliar with our question of the week, we post them when we remember, and they're really, really hard to come up with.
They are, dude.
So
they are.
If you think of a really good question of the week that you would like us to ask our fans, our listeners, please send it to us, because we're
begging. I'm begging.
We're
Don't
begging.
send it to Ashley. Send it to Kat.
Okay. Because
she's going to use it, and then I'm going to be like, fuck.
Well, clearly we're not co-hosts of the show or anything, but of the same show.
She checks the messages, so she gets first dibs. It sucks.
That's just the price you pay. Anyways, we would love your suggestions, and that's the same for story ideas. We would love your story ideas. Otherwise, you end up with stories like this. So please send us your story ideas. We love it. Like us on all the things.
It helps. Like us, review us,
yes.
Make sure you're following, share it.
Give us voicemail.
Oh, yes, the voicemail.
I'm going to play Sarah's voicemail.
Okay, so here we go.
Hey, y'all. It's Sarah. Just calling to leave y'all a little voicemail. So you have to have me on your show again. And I think I'm going to do this weekly. So we can call this the Sarah segment. And I'll say something nice about y'all. Since last time I came on, it was a little negative, some may say. But anyways, what I'm going to say this week is that y'all are fabulous. Your show is fabulous. And I love you guys. So I'll call back and leave you another message next week. Okay, bye.
Oh Oh my God. I swear the three of us could not be more different, and the fact that we are friends is just so fabulous to me. I love it.
I love it.
I love it.
I promised her I would play the voicemail, and so I did. So you're welcome, Sarah. It's
And
your new
she
segment.
looked so flippin' cute today. I am just so jealous of her style.
But for
She's
the
amazing.
record, just FYI, she did not leave one this week for
Okay,
sure.
that's
I checked
because
right before I got
she was
here.
PO'd that we didn't play it last week, so she's forgiven.
Now that I've
so.
said that, she's probably sent one in the time we've been recording, and then I'm going to be the asshole again and have to play two next week.
So next week you'll have to wait till next week for another Sarah segment.
But you can leave us voicemails. You just go to our website, catandashley.com. It's very easy to find. And in the bottom corner, there should be like a little microphone, and you can do it from your phone, you do it from your computer. There's no excuse. We love your voicemails. If they're appropriate, we'll play them on the air. Otherwise, we'll just listen to them and enjoy them ourselves.
Absolutely.
We'll probably still play it on the air. I mean, obviously. We are very inappropriate.
We are so inappropriate. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Until next week, please be kind to one another. It's almost spooky season.
Yes, almost my
Ugh.
favorite time.
Halloween. It's almost Halloween season. It starts tomorrow. It just starts.
I love
We're
it.
gonna start-
Well, I mean,
we're
it's
gonna
started
start-
for me, like, already.
Already.
Years ago.
Yesterday.
Never stopped for me,
I
honestly.
know, exactly. All right, everybody, have a great week, and we'll see you next week. Bye.